Good afternoon to all of you. It's a great pleasure to see you all. Allow me to allow a few housekeeping best practice. We try to put the video on if the line is good enough. Like this, we can see each other and having a minimum of social contact. This event wants to be a brainstorming. The Bauhaus spirit is that we share ideas. We try to highlight what's going on in different sectors. And today is a bit a special day. I would like I'm very grateful to all the speakers today because we want to build an ecosystem and would like to consider all together what are the implications of the green debate in the industry, but also outside of the industry. Today we kindly ask Monica Frassoni, former president of the Green Party, to give us a sense of what does it mean the Green Deal for the industry, but also from the broader political landscape. I think the political landscape is changing, and we need to be aware of how our world around us is changing and how the political debates in the coming months will be greener and greener. And I think that was so. Thank you, Monica, for being with us this morning. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here. But I mean, we didn't want only to cover the political aspect, but also the consumer landscape. Our key strategic partner, E.ON, is working very hard to get a consumer insight, to try to understand what the consumer are looking for. And we are very glad today to have Ligia with us because E.ON is contributing since the very beginning of this story from EMF in a strategic way, putting a lot of resources to try to help our banks in getting a better understanding where the consumer appetite is going to go. And then we have another strategic partner, Vincent from Hypoport, who was a pillar of the EDAP initiative, who is now trying to build for the first time a Dutch hub. The implementation of our initiative at local level is of fundamental importance. We need to be European, but also being rooted in every single market tradition, market understanding. And Vincent Hypoport and Christian are really helping us in getting this kind of Dutch flavor. Speaking about Dutch flavor, we are very happy to welcome also the latest energy efficiency mortgage label. And Woonnu is a really a key product in the market now that is bringing new ideas on how to shape a new product for green consumer. So thank you very much, Hendrik, to be with us and to help us in designing new product. With this small introduction, Richard, I would like to give you back the floor and guide us in this journey towards Europe and to see the different angles of our market. Thank you very much all for being with us.
Thank you, Luca, and good afternoon to everyone from me as well. 6 of these events. Thank you very much for deciding to spend another couple of hours in our company with the topics that Luca's just outlined there. At the first of these events, we spoke about the taxonomy and the problems that presented in the current proposal, the problems for our industry. At the last of these events, we spoke about the improvements, what Commission have done to address a lot of those problems, and by and large, given us a taxonomy we can work with, we can use in the real world and apply on the business side and integrate into the whole of the housing chain. But it isn't going to be that easy. And there are many practical considerations, difficult and important stuff. Data integrity, consumer education, labeling, building codes. And I think Luca already mentioned the Dutch focus of today's event. We're going to have a practical focus as well. Why are we using the Netherlands? Why are we focusing on that? I think the Dutch produced a very good guinea pigs for this. It's got a very high level of transparency, particularly in terms of economic factors. The mortgage market there is clearly vital to the overall economic system. And as we're going to hear a little bit from E.ON's survey, it is a culture with a very strong focus on environmental matters, which is why we have 2.5 Dutch-focused presentations today. As Luca mentioned, we have Woonnu, the latest label member, talking about some of the practical problems that they've encountered whilst they're introducing taxonomy compliant green loans and what I think is a very important feature, green loans with pricing differentiated according to energy efficiency standards. Now that theme of practicality is also picked up in the Hypoport presentation. We Obviously, the taxonomy is the first pan-EU attempt to define green economic activities, but it's coming on top of a lot of national definitions, national building codes, national systems, and trying to map those is something which Hypoport is doing some important work on. But as Luca mentioned, not entirely about the Netherlands, and I'm absolutely delighted to turn this into a political discussion for the first time. I think so far we've been talking about the role of Commission an enormous amount in these events, but ultimately what Commission does is driven by and answerable to our elected politicians. And there are very few elected politicians who have done as much in this area as Monica Frassoni. As Luca mentioned, from 2002 to 2009, Monica was the co-chair of the Green Group within the European Parliament. And then until 2019 was co-chair of the European Green Party. That's most relevant for today's discussion, though, is Monica's role as the president of the European Alliance to Save Energy. Monica, thank you so much for joining us today. I wonder if you could perhaps tell us a little bit about the bigger picture of the EU's Green Deal and where you see the taxonomy that we've been discussing fitting into that.
Well, first of all, good afternoon to everyone. I'm really glad to be actually not there with you, but at least in contact with you today to do this extremely key discussion, because, you know, I think that your role is really key, is important, is very relevant. Because Luca said we will be greener and greener. Well, I am not very sure that this is the reality. And this is probably the first message I would like to give. There is nothing that falls from the sky, not even 2 years more or less after the Green Deal has been decided, and at more or less 1.5 months from the presentation by the European Commission of the Fit for 55, the first tranche of the Fit for 55 package. So we are not really at the end of our story, and things could still go terribly wrong, which of course we don't advocate, but we really have to be head on. Because the Green Deal is not yet in our pockets, and that was, of course, that is of course rather normal, since it is a major plan, which, as you know, is composed by legislation, is composed by resource distribution, and is also done of capacity of fixing targets. So these are the 3 elements of the Green Deal, which make it a great idea. We are extremely lucky as Europeans that the Green Deal came about before the beginning of the COVID crisis, because if we did not have this kind of orientation and of clearly defined growth strategy, let aside the fact that it will go towards a really green growth strategy, I think that we would be much worse off in terms of answering in a coherent way with our climate and sustainability targets to what happened in the COVID and what is still happening in the COVID pandemic. So the first message I would like to give is this is not yet done, and there is a lot of work that has to be done, including from your sector, from industrial sector, from civil society, from local authorities, from the political arena, in order to make sure that the results are actually there. When I'm talking about results, I mean substantially that there is a coherence between the legislation, as I said, the resources, and the direction that business and therefore also the financial sector will take in order to lead the European Union towards climate neutrality in 2050. And I'm not speaking necessarily about net climate neutrality, but about climate neutrality to core, because this is one of those issues that can already tell us that there are a lot of loopholes that can be created and that by themselves can really lower certainly our ambition. So I believe that the question of the Green Deal is a great idea that concerns us all and also needs everybody's commitment. I will now make a couple of examples concerning indeed taxonomies. I was asked to intervene in this matter because it is the perfect example of what science can do, what the financial sector can do, what politics and the regulators can do, and also what the industry and in general the consumers can do. In reality, this is certainly a great idea, the fact of creating standards to define what is a green activity, but exactly as the Green Deal, it turns out to be much more complicated than what is probably it was first thought to be. Okay, let's define a green activity. What does it mean? Where does it go? Who has to be useful for? The taxonomy, exactly like the Green Deal, but also I would say exactly as the regulation on privacy. I'm hearing an echo. I don't know if it is normal.
We'll try to make sure that, I mean,
okay.
caller 4 will.
I go on.
Yeah,
I go on.
right.
Exactly as the privacy regulation and the Green Deal as an idea are probably the only areas.
I think caller 4, could you mute, please? Thank you.
I can try again. Can you
Perfect.
hear me?
Clear now, thank
Yes,
you.
thank you. I would say that these are probably the only areas in which Europe, the European Union, can say to have a leadership. But as it happened also with renewables about 10 years ago, is also an area where if it doesn't get it right, its reputation and its leadership indeed, which is a useful one in this sense, can go wrong. And I want to insist on that because we as Europeans have a major responsibility in the whole climate agenda, but we also have the responsibility towards our own citizens, our own economic systems, and our own workers, above all after COVID. And all of this, the Green Deal, the taxonomy, are related not only to the abstract goal of being climate neutral, but also specifically to the idea of letting Europe get out from its crisis and also find a purpose that will make it more competitive and more active. And I would like to maybe talk about the fact that this taxonomy became, I don't think that this was the idea of the Commission really, but it became the way through which the Green Deal can be labeled as really green or not. And I believe that this is something that is not yet, I believe, this is something that is not yet finished. Luca, this is something that probably we would not have foreseen 1 year ago. Everybody thought that with the adoption of the regulation in 2020, things were more or less smooth. It was actually very clear that very quickly that in the moment in which the discussion about the delegated act started, complication emerged that were thought to be more or less solved in the moment in which the regulation was adopted. I would like to say a few words about the issue of the delegated act in itself, because this carries a lot of political and institutional importance. When I was in Parliament, I was one of the 10 or 15 people in the whole system that got passionate about comitology, which is the old name of the delegated acts. Basically, there is a legislation that is adopted. In those times, the European Parliament had a very limited role in the fixing of the regulation, and so in the moment in which the legislation without the European Parliament was adopted, Council and Commission would find some arrangements and do some regulations that would be adopted at national level that would in some cases change the sense and the spirit of the main regulation itself. The risk with the delegated act on taxonomy is exactly the same. The fact that with the loopholes and the possibilities of defining certain activities that in the main regulation or that in other definition are certainly not considered to be sustainable, we can actually diminish the credibility of the whole system. This is happening in 3 areas. This is happening in the gas related questions. This is happening in forestry, and this could happen as far as nuclear is concerned. That's why the current delegated act that was proposed in April 21st is not complete, but we'll need to wait till, I mean, I don't know how many weeks or months, till we understand what is inside the delegated act concerning gas and nuclear in particular. Because it is very clear that if we accept, or if in the delegated act, it is written that you can consider to be sustainable or doing no particular harm, also activities that are related to gas as a transitional fuel, then it is very clear that the credibility of the whole exercise is lowered. It is very important to understand that one of the biggest misunderstandings, also at political level, that happened around this issue of taxonomy is that a lot of governments, and not only governments, also interest groups, notably in the fossil fuel area, but not only in the forestry, etc., consider that the fact of being inside the taxonomy, of not being inside the taxonomy system, means that investment cannot be done. Now, this is not really the issue. The investment will go on being done also in those areas, I'm sure. The point is that the taxonomy defines what is sustainable, what is green, and what is not, which means that what is not green should not be put in, but this is not the same thing as saying that a certain investment is forbidden. And this misunderstanding is today in the political and institutional debate, polluting the whole conversation on taxonomy. So basically the situation now is still open, because, as you know, the Commission only published a part of it with some very unsatisfactory parts on forestry, which was very much pushed by Nordic countries. And this makes me sad, because Greens are in the government of both Sweden and Finland, but apparently they were not able to push for a different regulation on forestry. So as now, if you go around cutting forests in an unsustainable way, or you make some kind of mono-use, monoplant intensive plantation, you can be defined as sustainable, and this is clearly not something that is done according to science. But we are still, of course, waiting for the completion of these instruments that are not yet out. So I will probably, Luca, stop here, because I'm sure that you may have some comments. And maybe we can have a short conversation in the last 10-13 minutes of my half hour.
Thank you very much, Monica. I've immediately got a question, if I can, about the international leadership of the EU. You mentioned that we were lucky that we had the Green Deal before the crisis. This has taken a long time to get to this stage in the taxonomy, and other people have had COVID first and then have started to look at it. Given that given the debate that you mentioned about gas, about forestry, about nuclear, even within a relatively homogenous continent where we've all got pretty similar goals, hopefully, there's still debate. How much can the taxonomy become a global standard? Can you think that America and Asia and Africa can look at the taxonomy and say, here's the model that we should work towards?
Well, I must say that if we don't get it right, we are not going to be able to exert any kind of example of leadership. And I must say that the others are not staying still. Japan and Canada are already finalizing their own taxonomy, which is much weaker than the one we want. The United States, Mr. Biden already talked about the taxonomy. So if you don't hurry up, this kind of role model will not be there anymore, because we simply are still wrangling so much internally that the whole system will not be ready. And so, you know, this happened already before when we were discussing in 2007 or 8 about renewables. We were really the forerunner, but then afterwards others took us over somehow. certainly technologically, but also, but not only technologically. So I think that we are really at risk of this situation, which is not a problem in itself, because if other countries would do a better taxonomy, then, you know, so be it. But unfortunately, this is not the case. What we are likely to see is that the other taxonomies, the United States and Japan, as I said, and Canada already have some in place which are weaker than ours, will be something that will push the whole exercise down. And in order to be useful, the taxonomy must be credible. And it is only credible if it is aligned to science and if it is coherent with the goal of being climate neutral. This has to, by the way, we already suffered a major blow because of the delays, and not only, because we could have, the European Union could have make the taxonomy as the principle governing the big next generation EU funds, right? Which was not the case. They said because the taxonomy was not yet ready, and they probably have a point. But that's not the only case, the only reason. So I think if we don't hurry up, things will certainly be more difficult, and our leadership role will be also more difficult. As I said, I'm not advocating the leadership role just for the sake of it, but because the others are certainly not going to do better. Well, on the contrary.
I'm wondering if, for example, in the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations has played a role there in defining the goals. Could it be that we could aim towards a United Nations administered global taxonomy, or is that just a pipe dream?
No, yeah, I mean, I must say that the first who started to work about this was a group of banks, basically, back in 2015, that created a working group and a task force that afterwards in 2017, led by Michael Brugman, which is an American, were working around this. So I think that this has to be a global exercise. What we are discussing now is if after so many discussions and so many difficulties, we have a concrete legislation which is able to have an impact here and now. This is the topic. I think that if we don't have that, the efforts at global level will go on because they already started, as I said, 6 years ago, but it is simply that their effect will probably be not as big.
Maybe just one comment from my side, Luca here. I mean, Monica, we have been working together for years. I think the challenge that we have now is to bring the taxonomy debate in the house of every single citizen, in the sense that we have to build a convenient package for consumers and trying to guide them to more sustainable business decisions in the house and whatever is surrounding the house. I mean, how do you see, because all our members here are making a huge effort in implementing an energy efficiency mortgage label. How do you see this kind of exercise? How we can join forces with other businesses around the house, around the banks, and build an ecosystem which will make convenient to all of us to make a greener solution instead of a browner solution? I mean, how we can build this? I mean, do you see a role for us as an industry here?
Well, you know what? I think that there is a huge role as long as we are as effective as those who are not interested in this agenda are. Now, if you have a look about what happened in the last few months around this, you can see that there has been a major push from natural gas producers and the pipelines producers, and Luca and I are Italian, and two of the biggest actors also in Brussels around this are Italian. One is ENI and the other one is NAM. They have been able to put up an amazing, since years, and spending a lot of money, an amazing narrative, making gas the transitional fuel that will make this whole thing possible. Of course, a transition is by definition not permanent, but you can also make, and as Italians we know this very well, something provisional, definitive. And I think that that is exactly the objective that they have. And the only way that we can counteract is by uniting forces in having a completely other narrative and another experience. And in this sense, the reason why we have, as the UEs, always supported you and your organization in the amazing work that you are doing, is because we are convinced that this kind of offers and this kind of market products, let's say, are indispensable to accompany the green transition. And we also try to work together from different sectors in order to create a mass that could be convincing. Because I think that in this specific moment, we have to get this kind of legislation together with the 50 for 55 package right. And then, or at least at the same time, we can of course convince consumer, but the people that we have to convince now are the regulators, because the regulators are those who now hold the key of the power of doing things or not doing them.
It's a very interesting point about transition. And one of the things I guess I wonder about the taxonomy is it a living thing? Is it going to evolve over time as the transition transitions? And is there a structure to say, let's review this in 5 years, for example? Is that an intention? Would that make sense?
You know, this is the argument that the gas people are using to say, well, let's define our activities provisionally sustainable. But here the point is, of course, I think that you have to be ready to evolve, because technology evolves. 5 years ago, we were not in the same situation as we are today. But I believe that there are some things that must be very clear. It is since, you know, back in 2011 that it was very clearly determined by a multidisciplinary financial organization that if you are using fossil fuels, or if you are extracting fossil fuels, you can't be considered to be sustainable. There is no other way around. Transitional or not transitional, you can be transitional but not sustainable. So I think that we have to really avoid the confusion here, and the clearest you are, the better equipped you are also to adapt to further developments. Because if you are wishy-washy at the beginning, things can get complicated. And that is why it is so difficult to get this thing right. I would say let's keep 2 or 3 months more time, but let's try to get it right. But also let's try not to leave the Commission alone in front of the national and government's interest, and also of some industrial interests that are going in the wrong direction. I really believe that we have everybody make our voice heard, and at the moment is not as heard as I would like it to be.
And then, so one final question from my side, and I encourage again the audience, please, if you do have any questions for Monica, please to put them in the chat room. The final question from my side is about the practicality. Nothing falls from the sky. You emphasised the difficulties in this. Always strikes me of green is, you know, normally in politics there are opposing forces. There's left and right, there's Brexit Remain, there's whatever. Other than individual interest groups, are there any potential threats to derail this agenda from a political side? We don't buy into this concept. We saw it in America until recently. Any threats from a political standpoint?
Sorry, you're saying if there are any adversary from the political side.
Yes, if people say this is
because your voice went away, so that's
sorry.
No. You see, I don't believe that this question of sustainability can, as you know, simply be put on the left and right element, but it is a reality that most adversaries to this agenda, or those who don't consider it to be particularly interesting or important, come either from the extreme left, or used to come at least from the extreme left, or from the conservative area. This is partly changed because, you know, the force of reality obliges everybody, whether you are right or left, to adapt to it and to find solution. So I think that the biggest strength is the capacity of dealing with facts and with reality more than ideology. And I think that the green thought or the ecological approach is an approach which tries to fix, to define, of course, a long-term view, but at the same time to be as pragmatic as possible in the moments in which you have to implement your goals. And this is, of course, what makes it quite complicated, because you don't have family in the right and you don't have family in the left somehow. Or everybody considers you as an ecologist as a sort of appendix of either of the two.
Yes.
So I think that here the importance of the rise of some green parties and of the European Party and of the European Green family as a whole is the capacity of bringing about an autonomous content which is able to be convincing, because able to work together with people from different fronts, to be rather transversal, while at the same time being extremely rigorous and not easy to compromise with. So this is, I would say, the approach, and the difficulties that we have coming from a little bit all over the place.
Right. Sadly, we have come to our half hour. But thank you so much, Monica, for joining us today, and more importantly, thank you for the work that you're doing overall. It's great to hear this reflection on it. And
Richard, can I steal you just 2 minutes to? I mean, Monica, thank you very much for being with us. I mean, tonight we will share with all our friends a nice video. It took us the entire weekend because we want to pass a message that the new economy, a new sustainable economy, should start from the oikos, from the house. And please, when you will see this video tonight in our social media, please share it. We want to greenstorm our industry, and we need your help to build an ecosystem. Monica, your organization is really the backbone of the businesses in Brussels. Together with us, we can really help in building this ecosystem. We want to continue to work with you and build a new oikonomos, which are a set of rules that can help a new economy for supporting the Green Deal. Thank you very much, Monica, for being with us.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao, arrivederci. Ciao, grazie.
Monica,
bye bye.
Yes, please can everyone keep watching their Twitter and their LinkedIn and their Facebook or wherever, and I'm intrigued to see that video. I haven't seen it yet.
Ciao.
For our second presentation today, I think we're going to stay in the spirit of democracy. Everything that we've spoken about in previous events to define green mortgage products is kind of useless if the consumers don't want them. What is a vital first step is understanding consumer attitudes, consumer preferences, maybe even cultural differences in the design of the product. Understanding this is something that E.ON has been looking into, and I'm delighted to hand over now to Ligia Bodgan, who's going to give us a sneak preview of some of the results of the work that they've been doing in this area. Ligia.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everyone. My name is Ligia. I'm delighted to be here and speak to you about our interim consumer research results. Maybe just briefly about myself. I'm actually Romanian, but work at E.ON in Germany, and I'm speaking to you from my parents' house in Sibiu in Romania. So please feel free to also put your questions in the chat, because we don't necessarily, I'm not sure how you prefer it, Richard, but I don't mind if we are to tackle any questions also during the presentation.
I think we'll save the questions to the end, but yes, please
okay.
Post them as we come, and then I'll ask them at the end.
Okay, perfect. Good. So, can you see my screen?
Yep, we can see the front slide, yes.
Perfect. Good. So what I want to touch upon today are three things. First, I want to highlight some of the consumer insights on green attitudes. Then to give you a summary of consumer reactions to green financing products that we tested, so both green mortgage and green loan. And thirdly, because we are in between the consumer research, we want to give you a sneak peek on the upcoming quantitative survey. Maybe before I delve into this current research, I just want to frame a bit the context. So previously, we've conducted in 2018 a consumer research in four countries, in Germany, UK, Italy, and Sweden. And this year, in 2021, we've extended with 5 additional countries, also courtesy from UCI in Spain. So how we are conducting the research. For the countries that we've added on, we are doing also a phase of exploratory research, so focus groups that we've conducted. And this is what I'm going to present today. And the upcoming research phase is a quantitative survey, roughly 500 respondents per market, tackling all the markets that you see here, so including UK, Italy, and Sweden. The full research report will be published in October of this year. Good. So just briefly on the methodology. So all the insights on the upcoming pages are extracted from research conducted by our agency we have mandated, so a bit called BASIS, a research and insights consultancy. And the research results, bear in mind, are preliminary, but we want to give you a flavor of them. And the methodology was exploratory research around focus groups. So we've done 2 focus groups per market, roughly 5 to 6 participants for a focus group. And we had 2 hours for each focus group because we really wanted to have a longer discussion with consumers. And what was very important to us is also selecting the right participants. So it's either less experienced homeowners or more experienced homeowners, but the ones that have had something to do with mortgages before are first-time buyers in the process of buying a mortgage, or are considering remodeling their home, remortgaging their home. So this was, let's say, the main criteria to have a nice mix of less experienced and more experienced homeowners. Now, in the first part of the focus groups, we explored a little bit about green attitudes. What do they think about energy efficiency in general? And this is what I want to highlight now in the next slides. So what is interesting to see, and also compared to 4 years ago, consumers are more ready than ever for energy efficient conversations. So it seems to be the time has come, the time is ripe now. Green topics are becoming increasingly salient. Climate change is a mounting concern, so there's a growing sense of urgency. With also the Greta Thunberg effect. Recycling has become in all markets ubiquitous and well established. Energy efficiency in general is increasingly prominent for consumers in all aspects of their lives. It's local politics, international politics, in terms of the products they buy, in terms of the businesses that they work in. So energy efficiency is constantly a topic of conversation. One other important aspect is transport, in terms of fuel efficiency, in terms of upcoming electric cars. And benefits are becoming clearer for most, not only in terms of financial benefits, but also in terms of environmental impact. And this is also something that we see at E.ON in many of the customer surveys we conduct. And if I compare to 7 years ago, customers would say, you know, for me, saving on my electricity bill, that's the top, that's the most important. And now this has changed radically, with one saying, I am interested that I have green energy. This is important to me, and I'm willing to pay a bit more. Now, interestingly, when we shift the conversation specifically to home energy efficiency, in general, this becomes slightly patchy and it's a bit remote or abstract for consumers. Now, most of the participants of the focus group have encountered an EPC rating or an energy certificate of the home, since it's being much more increasingly obligatory when you purchase a home or when you make a rental agreement, you come across it. It is a familiar format from appliances. So it could be that this also drives, so the appliance EPC is much more well known. It could be also because it's a more frequent purchase of appliances rather than the purchase of a home. Now, majority though do not know for sure their own home EPC rating. So it's also a minor fact in the home purchase decision. So it's not a central element to the purchase of the home. What's also important to highlight here is that the certification, the tiers in the EPC rating are not fully understood. So what does indeed make a home A rating? What does it exactly mean? So I'm trying to change my, there we go. Now I'm on the next page. Now, intent or desire to make energy efficiency changes is widespread, but what we notice is the willingness to act remains fairly low. And why is that? Let's briefly go through some of the reasons. In general, there are high perceived barriers. So there's the poor understanding of how to know what to do and how it look like. And there is a real and perceived cost that this is expensive. So efficient homes or home improvements are generally perceived as very expensive. And also there's some practical limitations because if there are some historical homes in the city center, many think, okay, this is very hard to improve. There is also limited motivation. So what are the direct benefits? Sometimes it's felt, okay, the comfort and cost savings are relatively minor perhaps. And there is a long-term payoff. So any benefits would take years to actually make a difference. For example, solar panels, they become exciting once it's maybe lower, a payback time of 6, 7, 8 years, where what we see in countries where there are really subsidies behind it. But if it's something more than 10 years of payback time, this becomes more difficult to sell. And also there is no sense of urgency for the home energy efficiency. So what is the reason to really act now? Another element is when the consumers think about making a purchase decision, they also look for their dream home. So historic charm sometimes plays a big role. And they like homes with a bit of more of character. So they see that this could be, they don't necessarily want to compromise and maybe maybe putting solar panels on their roof could diminish a bit of the historic charm of the home. So all in all, home energy efficiency is still a low priority for most consumers. Now, doing the focus groups in 5 countries, we also could also rank the countries a bit from the feelings we got in the focus group along a certain timing of least green thinking to most green thinking. So markets are indeed at different levels of maturity in terms of the understanding and the prioritization and acting on home energy efficiency. When we look at Hungary, green issues feel trendy and future-facing. Many of them mentioned thinking about making green improvements to their homes, but it's not, let's say, on top of their mind. In Romania, there is also growing engagement with environmental issues, but there is a clear motivation on cost savings first and foremost, rather than environmental impact within the home. So participants in the focus group clearly also mentioned many times the payback time of efficiency improvements. In Portugal, we noticed there is a reasonable understanding of green topics, but many feel constrained and not able to make many changes of their home because of their financial circumstance. In Spain, we noticed core green behaviors such as recycling, insulation are well established, and there is a broad awareness of energy performance certificate and home energy issues. And in this comparison, Netherlands definitely we can list as most green thinking, where green topics and home energy efficiency are taken seriously and given high priority by many. And many have also now taken concrete steps to improve their home energy efficiency. What maybe it's interesting to notice, and what really surprised me, one participant said, because we had a question also about home energy management apps, and one participant said, yes, oh, I've been recently to a birthday party, and the person showed me on the phone how much the solar panels generate. So it's really become a conversation that people have also with their friends in terms of really thinking about being more green and more sustainable. Good. Now, I would like to go more in detail on what were the consumer reactions to the green financing products that we tested. Okay, I'm just trying to, good. So what did we test? Well, we first tested a green home discount mortgage, which means that if the consumer already buys a home that has an EPC rating of A or B, then the consumer can get an interest rate discount of 0.5% for A and 0.25% for B in Hungary and Romania, for example. We checked this with the discounts in the banks in Romania. In Netherlands, of 0.25% for A and 0.15 for B. And in Spain and Italy, also consulting with UCI, it's a lower interest rate discount, but also a reduced lower down payment. So this was the first product we tested. Then we also tested a variation of the first product, the green home improvement mortgage, we called it, to say to consumers, okay, if you buy a home that's not A or B, then what you can get is an extra green loan on top of your mortgage. And here we tested two variations. So we tested one variation where you get an extra discounted loan to the same conditions as the mortgage in terms of interest rate and duration. And we tested a version with and without also discount on mortgage after conversion to a green home. And we've also tested additionally green loan. So this product is not connected to the mortgage, to also test the attractiveness of consumers to such a product. So for example, usually for the ones who are not necessarily buying a new home, but they're interested in making energy efficiency improvements on their home, and they can get a discount, and this is depending on the market, from 0.5% to 2% compared to a consumer loan. Good. So now I would briefly like to go through these three products and give you a view on what consumers liked and what they think is room for improvement. In terms of the green home discount mortgage, this is a clear proposition and a very kind of easy to understand for consumers, rewarding their green behaviors. So they see, okay, discount, tangible
Ligia, are we losing you there? It's not just me that we've lost.
No, I think she's frozen, Richard.
Frozen.
Yeah.
Oh, I think she's moving again now, though, so she might be back.
Ligia, can you try again?
Oh, can you hear me?
We lost you for about a minute there. Broadband cut out.
Okay, so very sorry. I don't know what happened. Can you see my screen now?
We can see the front page of the screen, yes. Okay, yeah, we're back to where you were. We're just on the left box.
Okay, let me make it. Okay, now you can see my screen. Perfect. So should I start on the green home discount?
We heard that, and we heard this bit. We didn't hear so much the second box.
Oh, okay, perfect. Good. Thank you. So this kind of product in very low interest environments, a small, like in the Netherlands, where a typical standard mortgage is around 1%, a small discount feels quite meaningful. Whereas in other markets, such as Romania and Hungary, even though let's say the discount is a bit higher with 0.5%, still compared to a mortgage of 4 to 5% rate, the discount doesn't feel meaningful enough. So here you see the discount is too low in most cases. And they also say EPC is never a major factor in choosing a home. What I found very interesting also in focus groups from the Netherlands, also in Romania and Hungary, for example, this product, it feels a bit unfair because they say, well, you're only rewarding the ones who can afford to buy already a property that's A or B. So it's already perceived that these properties are very expensive, and only the people who have the financial means also get the discount. Now to the second and probably the most important product, the green home improvement mortgage. So what were some of the positives? The consumers really liked that it reduces the monthly cost of borrowing. So the additional green loan, a spread over 25 years, the monthly cost is reduced. It does, they feel, okay, this makes it for me more accessible, more affordable to make energy efficiency improvements. And in low mortgage cost countries such as Netherlands and Spain, it offers long-term savings as well. So the overall price of the loan is definitely worth it. Also, in markets where the mortgages feel safer than loans, such as Netherlands, Spain, and Portugal, it also, the additional borrowing on top of the mortgage is more acceptable. And when we tested also with an additional discount on the mortgage itself, this became quite appealing. Now, interestingly enough, in countries where mortgages are more expensive, so in this case, Hungary and Romania, this kind of mortgage saves in the short term, but costs slightly more in the long term. And people here, there is a clear difference in trust to financial institutions. It's also historically driven in Romania, for example, and also in Hungary, with people taking mortgages in Swiss francs, and then this really scarred them. So they see mortgages as a bit more scary, whereas consumers in the Netherlands would say, oh, taking a mortgage, that is safe. This is a great proposition for me. Whereas in countries such as Romania, a participant clearly stated, oh my God, a loan on top of another loan. Oh, no. So it's a really also a mental blockage when they saw this. So that's why they see it as an additional burden. Additionally, what's also important to highlight, of course, the bureaucracy that this journey indicates. So the process of selecting installers, conducting the work on your house is kind of complex and off-putting. Additionally, the accreditation. So what happens if I don't achieve the additional two steps increase in the EPC rating? This failing of accreditation feels a bit frightening and risky. Now, just briefly, I want to speak about how we can improve and how we're thinking of improving the current product, so the improvement mortgage. One of the key factors is bureaucracy, as I stated, so it feels a bit daunting, the whole process of selecting an approved provider. In greener markets such as Netherlands, the green audit feels very valuable. In other markets, this feels a bit meddling and controlling, so in markets such as Romania and Hungary. An idea here, of course, is to streamline the process by using digital tools, and Netherlands is a prime example in this, with sustainability checks that some of the banks already offer. The second issue is the issue of trust. So we wanted to test how consumers feel about having banks offering a list of approved providers. So in more trusting markets, this feels fair, convenient, and straightforward. So they actually welcome the fact that the bank is working with a partner that can manage this for the consumer. In other markets, this can feel a bit restrictive and raises doubts about the relationship between the banks and the installers. So here it's also important to recognize and allow more choice for consumers. So if they want to find the installer partners themselves, this can be as an option. And of course, flexibility. So offering very little flexibility can be off-putting. Many indeed value this full service option, but others do want to manage the project on their own. They also don't appreciate necessarily given a time frame that they have to do these improvements by a certain time. They would like to have the flexibility to complete the improvements now, this year, or to have up to, let's say, 2 or 3 years later. And of course, early repayments of the mortgage are something quite attractive. Good. In terms of offer, they saw another long-term cost. It's just a straight saving on cost of the loan. But in markets of additional long-term borrowing and in markets of like Romania and Hungary, it feels much safer and simpler option to take a green loan. They also said, well, the value of the discount is too low, and for such a low discount, they see these lots of conditions and restrictions. Good. I also wanted to touch upon what I found really interesting, because we've shown the example of potential energy efficiency improvements, and most of the consumers mentioned insulation as kind of a straightforward efficiency improvement, and then they also mentioned solar and EV chargers. Interestingly enough, they didn't link it so much with a boiler replacement or other efficient heating. And this could be, for example, technologies such as heat pumps are less well known in the market. Good. Just also looking at the time in terms of giving you a sneak peek on the upcoming quantitative survey research. We would like to focus also taking the consumer feedback into account on the key product, the Green Home Mortgage product, and really bring out the benefits to life for a consumer. So to bring the financial savings, so that you get attractive interest rates for your mortgage, not just on the additional extra green borrowing, but also on the mortgage itself. That you can have a home analysis and savings assessment that's quite easy to do online. That you can also choose among a network of certified partners for additional energy improvements. And that also energy efficient homes can bring 20 to roughly 50% savings on your energy bill, depending on the improvements that you make. And additionally, the market value of your home can increase. And last but not least, that it's not only the financial savings, but it's also improving the CO2 footprint. Good, so that was, let's say, from my side.
Great. Thank you very much, Ligia. You actually shamed me with one thing there. You said that most people don't know their own home's EPC. And I've got to put my hand up and say, yep, I'm going to find out though, I promise. We've had one question that has been asked. Somebody's asked simply why that choice of countries in the survey. You chose 5 countries, I think.
Yes, so for Spain and Portugal, UCI is funding the additional research, and for additional countries, Hungary, Romania, and the Netherlands, it's also because we wanted to expand the previous research also to include a full view of Europe, so to also include Eastern European countries, and as well Netherlands, because as we're going to see also in the upcoming presentations, I think it provides a very good benchmark in terms of green thinking.
I completely agree with you, and that is a very convenient link onto the next presentation. Thank you for that, and thank you for your presentation.
Richard, allow me to say that, I mean, we have asked Ligia to come to speak directly with all the label banks. So in the next meeting of the label banks, we would like to share more input with our banks to help them to design product. So Ligia is, as I said at the beginning, a strategic partner for us. So we see very much this kind of a link between utilities and banks that we can operate together. And our journey started with EMAP, then we had HEDAP, then now we have EMAP, where I mean, we are really trying to build this ecosystem, and Ligia will be really working hands in hands and very close to our label banks to be ready to give insight and to provide a market solution as soon as this will be possible in terms of opportunities in different markets. So Ligia will be speaking with our label banks in the coming weeks and trying to see if these outcomes are useful for them.
I'm pretty sure they will be. I'm not a labeled bank. Can I come?
If you are kind with us, yes, we will see what we can do.
Promise to be kind.
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you again, Ligia. And yes,
thank you all.
We're now going to move on to the Netherlands. Now, as I said at the beginning, the taxonomy might be the first EU-wide attempt to define these topics. But of course, national standards already exist, particularly in countries like the Netherlands, where all of these topics have been discussed in building codes, energy performance certificates. We're going to have a little look at the practicality of applying the taxonomy to such a country. Something that the National Energy Efficient Mortgage Hub of the Netherlands has been looking into in more detail. So I'd like to ask Vincent Mahieu, who is a spokesperson of the hub. Firstly, Vincent, can you introduce the hub, and then can you share with us a few of the practicalities of that integration?
Yeah, of course. The hub is basically is a result of what we noticed, basically a request from the Energy Efficient Market Initiative, that there is a lot of regulation on the European front that in the end, in a practical way, when it comes down to the details, must be implemented in a national way. And there we have to do with the local building codes. This is something that is inherent in, for instance, the European Building Directive, NZEP, that really states, well, you have to implement it locally. And from there, this is basically our answer from, also Luca's and Jennifer's request, to organize on a national level to think about how to cover these subjects in short. So that's the idea. So I just kick off, Richard, and go on while I started.
Please do.
Okay, I'm not really sure who is controlling the mouse. Can we put it in maybe? Yes, full screen with Control L, maybe. That's better. That it's a bit better readable. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, this is the agenda for today. It's basically twofold. I want to say something about the Dutch hub, a bit more elaborate than the 30-second pitch I just did. And then second of all, make it a bit concrete. Already the discussions we are having in this Dutch hub are really practical. For instance, the screening criteria of Annex 1, the climate change mitigation, and how to cover those, how to go about these in practice as they are coming into law the 1st of January. Maybe start at the beginning. My name is Vincent Mahieu. I work at Hypoport. We are a fintech software company in Amsterdam. We make software and for reporting for mortgage portfolios, in particular cover bonds and securitizations. And as we know nowadays, the mortgage business is a very data-driven business, and we'll talk about this a bit more about the consequences of this as well. I participated in the EDAP meeting or in the EDAP consortium during 2018 to 2020. And from there, I already noticed what's coming and that it will be good to organize on a national level the topics we are covering here. So if we, so this is the agenda. If we can go to the next slide. So about 2 months ago, we kind of kicked it off with the Dutch mortgage hub. It took us a bit more time. The next speaker, actually, Hendrik Jan Luikinga from Woonnu, was instrumental in getting this group together. Because we pitched it to the participants that there's a lot of regulation coming. We have a lot of regulation in the Netherlands. In addition, we have on a European political scale the EU Green Deal, the EU Renovation Wave. We have on a national level the National Climate and Energy Plans. In Dutch, that's the National Climate Treaty. And all these come together, for instance, at the bank, that gives their own commitment to sustainability as well. And there are implications from a retail level all the way to an institutional level, which is, for instance, the cover bond side that some of us are familiar here. So our goal, bit broadly defined, promote and accelerate the adaptation of energy efficient housing in the Netherlands. So we're a voluntary group that comes together in the roundtables. We now have 3 meetings, and in a week or 2 or 3 we will have the 4th meeting. I'm already very happy with the participants, the parties that are involved. We are working even on more parties to join the hub, but we need to go to a few steps also before they can all align or agree to participate. But already with this group, we have more than 50% of the Dutch retail mortgage market covered. So I will not go into depth to all of them, but what I'm really happy about is that we have representatives here from the banks, insurers, a big legal firm, data and IT, and we have NHG, which is the state-owned national hypotheek, which is the Dutch word for mortgage guarantor. We have that party involved, and I'm also really glad to have parties like Allianz and APG who are the investors, and I think that's also important to have their opinion also when we talk about all the consequences, because we talk about the consumer, which is very important, but it's also very interesting to see the scope of the investor, the party that actually ends up buying the mortgages often in a portfolio form as well. So a diverse group that can shed light from different angles. We're in talks also of the Dutch Ministry of Internal Affairs to join, and the Ministry of Finance, and a few other parties. If we can go to the next slide. So shortly, what we want to cover, we want to align on the forthcoming regulatory reporting on a European scale, and how to implement that on a national scale. We want to share insights, and we want to align. As I will talk about later, the Netherlands is a relatively standardized market in terms of data, definitions, reporting. And I think, and not only me, but some of the other participants think that the energy efficiency is very likely to increase in scale and scope rather than diminish. So also here, it's I think good to align with the parties and give a practical definition basically on what a Dutch energy efficient mortgage will become. That's one of the goals, to establish these kinds of best practices. If we can go to the next slide. Yeah, okay, so very briefly, some key characteristics about the Dutch mortgage market. As I said, we are a relatively open and transparent market. We have a lot of different mortgage labels and thus a lot of competition. So there are about 40 different mortgage labels, and about 70% of the mortgages are produced to independent intermediaries. There's a lot of standardization, as I mentioned. Standardization comes in different forms, be it the national guarantee, which is the NHG I mentioned. It's in terms of the product offerings to customers, which the state NIBUD, which is the budget institute, standardize the mortgage products and sets the specifications. But also on the institutional side. So on the cover bonds side, for instance, we are relatively organized. On the securitization side, we are also relatively standardized and organized. And that brings me to the third point. As some of you might know, the Dutch housing sector in general is very dependent upon external financing via capital markets. That being in particular cover bonds, securitization, but also some other forms like wall loan funding. I think as I've encountered, this is a sought after asset class. Instrumental for the functioning of the Dutch economy overall. I think also, as mentioned in the previous presentation, the green, or as I should say, energy efficient aspect is relatively popular, both at consumers. They think it's very important. But also on the investor side, more institutional side, so throughout the whole spectrum. So in the Netherlands was, I think, one of the first where we issued a party issued a green securitization, and there are now some green cover bonds like we see in some other countries as well. I think in particular this is interesting because, for instance, with the securitization you have the monthly public disclosure of loan level data and the related EPCs. That brings us to the fifth point, the housing stock. That's relatively green. You see the pie chart in the lower left corner. Those are the figures as of 2020, and I must say that is on the 2020 methodology. I will tell a little bit more in the next slide, but there's a new methodology. You see that 2.5% is label A and 16% is label B. And the last point, NCEP, as you might know, the climate law of the European Commission says that member states must also write down their plans in the national climate and energy plans. The Dutch Climate Treaty is the formalization of those ambitions. In particular, the financial sector has written what is called the climate commitment, where they give where they say that they will report periodically on their ambition to and on the progress to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so this is, I think, an important one. This is the Dutch building code. The Dutch, that's a characteristic of I think the Dutch housing market. We have a new methodology. It's called BANG. It's a Dutch abbreviation, maybe a bit unfortunate for international conferences, but it's automatically includes the European Building Directive and NZEP, Near Zero Energy Building Directive, and it includes the Dutch National Climate and Energy Plan. So that's good to keep in mind. This new methodology has a new calculation methodology. It's a bit technical. It's called NTA 8800. The reason I'm boring you with this is because of the next point. There are 3 pillars in this new methodology. It's called BANG 1, 2, and 3, as you see in the green box. And these are basically criteria by law, Dutch law. BANG 1 is the total energy demand of a building, if you want to build a new building. 2 is the energy demand of the prime energy demand, which we'll see is an important one in the taxonomy context. And BANG 3 is the share of energy demand from renewable sources. So, for instance, solar panels. By law, that should be at least 40% for new residential constructions. If we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so here you see this new methodology that came into law as of January 1st this year. If you look at the table, you see it has the somewhat familiar colors and letters, but now it goes all the way to quadruple plus. What's interesting about this is that this is directly related to the BANG 2 indicator that I just mentioned, and that's prime energy demand in kilowatt hours per square meter. So you see here a direct mapping of what that represents. And a really important one is, if you look carefully, a triple plus. It's the law that you need to abide by if you build a new construction for a residential building. So by law, it already says what label you need to have and what the prime energy demand is related to this. An energy label that is given is valid for 10 years. If we go to the next slide, I summarize this here quickly. So this Dutch BANG, it embeds a couple of items, EPBD, it's the Building Directive, European Building Directive, NZEP, which the EU taxonomy refers to a lot, the National Climate Plan. The fourth characteristic is that it directly relates to the prime energy demand. The fifth characteristic is that it's a direct measure and direct related to the National Building Code. I just mentioned that, A++, 50 kilowatts hours per square meter by law. And the sixth characteristic, it's publicly available for free for everyone. I must say, it's to obtain one costs between 300 or 400 euros typically, but once it's there, everybody can look it up. If we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so in short, the EU taxonomy, I think we've talked about this a lot, but that's the language we are going to talk about, what is green and what is energy efficient, to use the correct term. And in particular, in this slide, we looked at the what relates to mortgages. So if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, I won't cover this too deep, but more for the complete picture. We looked at the annexes, the climate change mitigation regulation that came out about 2 or 3 weeks ago. If we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so in particular, we looked at climate change mitigation. We thought this was really interesting. Mortgages are not directly mentioned, so you need to dig a bit into the wording there. But what this mentioned is the financing of the economic activity, construction of buildings, renovation of existing buildings, or the acquisition and ownership of buildings. And yeah, we studied the legal wording there. And the reason we did this is that, also a other study in which some Dutch banks and Spanish and French banks participated by the European Banking Federation also looked at these 3 items to assess the impact on mortgages. If we can go to the next slide. So maybe this is a bit, I know it's a lot of words on, but this is the EU taxonomy. This is the exact wording. So those 3 categories that I just talked about, construction of new buildings, renovation, and the acquisition of ownership. Yeah, these are the ones that have a direct consequence on how we conduct our mortgage business in the Netherlands. In particular, for instance, item 1, just by the sheer way it's formulated, is at least 10% lower than the threshold as set in the national, in the NZEP requirement in national measures where the EPBD is implemented. Yeah, and this is already, having gone through the whole story that I told you about BANG, our Dutch methodology that embeds a lot of EU regulation. Then this is a bit of a tricky one where we need to look careful because we automatically abide by a lot of European regulation. As I mentioned, it directly relates to prime energy demand, it needs to be at least 10% lower than that. The other one, the 30% renovation, should lead to at least a 30% reduction in prime energy demand. That has some challenges. And the definition of acquisition of new buildings. In the next slide, I give an overview. Yes, so we did roundtable meetings and we just gathered comments from the banks and we listed a few of them in the tables here. And you see here already, for instance, the first one, construction of new buildings. There are some challenges. How can we cover this in practice? We don't check that yet from the data. We check the as by the BANG regulation. It already relates to the energy demand and it has a national threshold for the building code of 50. So if we need to check that it's 10% better, then we then, for instance, need to assess whether it's 45. So yeah, that's an important one. Another interesting item there, also mentioned in the previous presentation, this regulation very much steers toward prime energy demand and less so if you look into a retail consumer, less so than what you would typically see if you go on the internet for a green mortgages view. The first thing you see is a picture of solar panels, but yeah, that's a little bit less of importance directly if you look at the EU taxonomy. How to measure the 30% renovation? Yeah, some practical challenges there. How do we go about with existing buildings that already have a valid EPC, but based on an older methodology? Again, how do we inform the client? A couple of all these kinds of practical items. And the last one, which is the majority of the mortgage business, just the financing of buying an existing house. Yeah, so here you choose Class A, well, or the top 15 of the national energy, of the stock in terms of national prime energy demand. And then it really matters which route do you choose, the Class A or the 15% in terms of prime energy demand, and how do you measure that, for instance. If we go to the next slide, Richard, as fate will have it, on the left side, this is my personal energy label of my house that I bought a few months ago. That's the old methodology, but I want to say that's from 2020. 2020, and we have a new methodology on the right-hand side that I mentioned, BANG. And that one, in contrary to the old methodology, directly measures also the kilowatt hours that prime energy demand that is so important for the EU taxonomy. You can read it, but I highlighted it in yellow, and that's the type of information that we need and that we need to steer towards. If we can go to the next slide. I already covered this, that there are in the Netherlands, they are readily available, so I won't go. Maybe again, next slide, sorry. So what is important for us is that, as I mentioned, the access to the capital markets. That's really crucial. If I look at the statistics now, more than 25% of the mortgages for consumers is originated via non-banks. So these are parties that are 100% financed via the capital markets, either in particular, for instance, via securitization. And it's what we hear a lot from the partners, which second bullet is, we need to make sure that the eligible investments remain here, because we did already a lot of effort of the Dutch housing stock to make it energy efficient. But with this regulation, we need to be coherent and the best practices that we choose. And that, I think, is very important role the hub can play there, because our main goal is we want to increase the energy efficient housing stock, whether it's for the consumer or the capital markets. And that's our ambition, because we also want to, of course, in the end, we do it to abide also by the Paris Agreement. And in that way, we must make sure that financing the transition stays our top priority. In that sense, the level playing field, I do want to mention that there are some concerns there. We have just a different starting position. We have the EPBD, NZ, all directly implemented, directly related to prime energy demand. This is not the case in all member states. Our building stock is a bit different in the Netherlands. 22% is label A, where it's a different percentage in other countries. Our average energy usage, I looked it up in the iBroad Horizon project, also greatly differs in the Netherlands compared to our neighboring countries. So it's good to have that in mind, that that we come from a different starting position. We can go to the next slide. Last Bauhaus meeting, Miguel said it, I think, already. The housing stock will evolve. With each building we build, the housing stock differs. If we look at the 15%, for instance, this distribution will change. And on the other hand, the screening criteria will change. If you read them, every 3 years they will review it. The Dutch building code will be reviewed every once in a while. So this dynamics should be tracked, with the goal of making the eligible stock taxonomy compliant as broad as possible. Last week, the Dutch Central Bank published a study where it says the investments in the Netherlands in this are not enough, and that we should promote sustainable economic development. So in this slide, I wanted to mention that that's also our concern, to finance this transition to the broadest extent possible. Coming to the next slide, and that's also my last slide in terms of the time. So what do we conclude? Maybe not so much a conclusion yet, because we're still sorting out what it means, this EU taxonomy. As I said in my introduction, the mortgage business is a very data-driven business. So we need to look into what the consequences are. And we do this with the parties that are involved. What we see, NZAP is embedded in the building code. The building stock already has certain characteristics, and we need to find best practices on how we're going to approach the EU taxonomy on a national scale, and yeah, to broaden the eligible stock. Yeah, and there are some practical challenges, interpretation, data challenges, and yeah, as I talked to some Dutch parties, we should recognize already the first green mortgages that are the offerings have been issued today that are going to go in production in the new year, and they do not, if you really look closely under a microscope, do not abide yet with the EU taxonomy, even though this party says, for instance, it's a sustainable mortgage, and of January 1, yeah, there are very strict rules in what you can call sustainable. So it's, I think, very, I'm looking forward to work with Luca with the energy efficient mortgage label and come up with the coherent Dutch best practices how to go about this in the coming years. And yeah, if I can be so blunt, I would like to invite myself maybe later this year to tell you a bit more on the ideas from the Dutch Hub.
Thank you, Vincent, for all your kind support. Allow me to say a few words of thank you and gratitude for what you are doing in the Netherlands. Thank you all, and to all our Dutch friends that are doing great work over there. Thank you.
I totally echo that, and also thank you for explaining this. As you say, no conclusions, but it's clear that there's a lot of complicated work needs to be done. I'm kind of glad you're doing it and I'm not. One of the reasons, I guess, that Holland is so important in this debate is, as you said, the reliance on capital market investors. And I just want to ask you one question, if I can. Investors quite like binary. They like green or not green, a simple yes or no. And nothing I hear here is simple. This is grades of compliance, all these BENG categories. And are investors part of this process? Are you discussing this with them day to day?
Yeah, that's why we also, as I mentioned, have a few big investors and insurance companies and pension funds on board that buy this. And in the end, we must not forget, we in this group, we talk a lot, I think, on the high level, but in the end, this boils down to a collateral level eligibility, yes or no. And that needs to be proven. If you look at any prospectus of a covered bond each month or each quarter, from a quantitative side on the data. So yeah, I see that there are some challenges because we need to align the systems for those types of transactions, but also the retail funding should also be centered a bit more towards the wording of the EU taxonomy. And we must not forget that it will also play for the green bond standard that comes and the securitization framework, etc. So this is the language we're going to use in the coming years. So I think it's extremely important to do this now in each country.
Understood. Yeah, thank you. And thank you again, Vincent. We do have to move on, and it's very fitting. I think our last presentation today is going to bring together a lot of the themes that we've been discussing about attitudes towards green mortgages, about the practicalities. We're going to turn to a green mortgage lender, Woonnu, a new name perhaps to some of you. And I'd like to ask Hendrik Jan Luikinga, the CIO of Woonnu. First of all, Hendrik Jan, can you introduce the company? And then can you tell us a little bit about how you've approached the commercial aspects of all of these discussions with real consumers and well, what lessons you've learned from that?
Well, before that they start, allow me to welcome them, as I said before, as a new energy efficiency mortgage label. I mean, for us, it's very important to have a strong community in the Netherlands. And so welcome on board. It's a great pleasure to have you, and thank you for your trust.
And again, can I, floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. Are we still on mute?
No, I can hear you.
Me right now?
Good.
Okay. It's an honor to present the observations from Woonnu as we are live for a little bit more than half a year in what we have seen in the Dutch mortgage markets on the sustainability and the sustainability conversion. For a starting point, Woonnu's a live experiment, as Ligia already said, in how you can work with pricing schemes towards the customer to activate them to convert their building to a more energy sufficient building. So let's start with what is Woonnu, with the first sheet. Woonnu is part of the NN Group and is a 100% subsidiary of NN Bank. So we are a established mortgage lender in the Netherlands with a portfolio of approximately 53 billion and 8.2 billion originated in 2020. We as Nationale-Nederlanden have set ourselves very ambitious targets for sustainability. And that's one of the main reasons why we set up a separate mortgage label for the sustainability version. It's easier to do it with a focus, with a small team, as a startup, than integrated in the, I would say, the established mortgage originator. We were launched on the 17th of August 2020, and it's also particularly interesting to know that it is set up as a hybrid mortgage lender, where besides our own funds are invested, also funds from external investors. Then we can flip to the next sheet, please. What is Woonnu? Yes, Woonnu contributes to the sustainability conversion of the Dutch property stock, and by primarily offering consumers a mortgage loan that rewards improvements in the energy label of their property, and on top of that, supporting consumers in realizing the conversion. The process of converting a high energy label to a low energy label is quite difficult, and you need a specialist, which we provide for the process. But on top of the consumers, we also believe that the intermediary who have a large market share in the Dutch mortgage market in providing information towards consumers play a crucial role, and investors on top, as one of the last questions from you, Richard, play also a critical role in the push towards a more sustainable housing stock in the Netherlands. We are live since August 2020, and we look forward to share our observations from the first months of our lives. But let's start on the next sheet with some relevant facts of the Dutch housing market. The next sheet, please. Yeah, about 7.9 million properties in the Netherlands, which only 3.8 million have a confirmed energy label. Of these 3.8 million properties, a little bit more than 22% have an energy label of A, and 60.7% has an energy label of B. Until the end of last year, it was possible to obtain a confirmed energy label for as low as €5 via an online application. But as of the 1st of January, it is you need an EPC certificate, but only can be obtained after on-site visit from a certified agent. So, and that also creates a hurdle because we don't have enough certified agents currently in the market. And it costs, and Vincent already mentioned, over €300. Another sheet. Next one, please. What already was mentioned also by Vincent, we have very strict building regulatory which applies to new build. And what also is interesting to know is that a large percentage of our buildings in the Netherlands are apartments, and I will flip to that later on, that apartments also have an extra hurdle. So the Dutch building regulation for new build is currently A++, and it's also applicable for major reservations. So we go to the one of the last sheets of the relevant facts on the Dutch housing market, which is also a hurdle to, next sheet please, but also a hurdle to activate customers and intermediaries in the current very active market, is that the number of transactions is at all-time high, over 60,000 mortgage transactions Q1 2021. And on the flip side, the number of housing transactions is at an all-time low, which are for sales. It's only 17,000. So the intermediaries have a large push on their capacity on providing mortgages to the Dutch customers. Vincent already mentioned that a part on the next sheet, a part of the Dutch mortgages are have the benefit of a NHG guarantee, and especially those mortgages which have a kind of a state guarantee are interesting for external investors if they want to dip into the Dutch market. But it's difficult to activate the large part of the NHG customers, because some of these, a larger part of the energy mortgages are currently in the apartments. In the Netherlands, more than 70% of all mortgages are distributed through the intermediary channel. That's why we focus on the intermediary for the activating of our customers towards the energy transition and the sustainability conversion. Next sheet, please. In general, more than 65% of mortgages have an interest rate of 20 years or longer. The average rate for the 100% LTV is 1.75. And if you then look to the data, which Vincent already mentioned, it's quite difficult to abstract post-origination which part has been used for sustainability conversion or simply renovation. Those numbers are not currently paramount in our system. But on the other side, the Dutch Climate Agreement, which is all, which almost all the largest mortgage originators have said, have a very challenging objective of improving the energy efficiency of the mortgage portfolios towards a label A by 2030. So then you have to flip back to the previous sheets and then look at how many owner-occupied currently have an A label, and then have to think, well, our ambition is to improve most of these labels to an A level. But that's quite difficult. And if you then go to the next sheet, the cost price for, in general, which is calculated, is for the average house in the Netherlands is between 5,000 euros if you're moving from a B to an A label, up to 22,000 euros if you try to convert a G label to an A label. But with the B to an A label, it's more predictable what the costs are. But from G to an A label, the 22 can easily be 40 or even 100,000 euros. So there is a very I would say, difficult process in activating the customers with a higher energy label to move to the lower energy label in the current difficult mortgage market. Based on the expected investment, the expectation is that for the whole Dutch housing market, the investment should be about 35 billion. And if we want to move to the energy neutral, and it means in the Netherlands that we also don't want to use natural gas, this amount can easily flip to 75 billion. And in my guess, that it's not a conservative prediction. So what distinguishes Woonnu from other mortgage originations? So then we move to the Woonnu proposition, which is the next sheet. And then the next one, please. We take an integrated vision on all the parties that are active in the mortgage market, the consumer, the investor, and the intermediary, where the intermediary is the one who can activate the consumer, and the investor can push by setting low returns on investments the consumer into the sustainability conversion. But what we now will do is solely focus on the commercial proposition towards the consumer, and take a small step in the world where the consumer is when he tries to find out how he can convert his house. So we go to the next sheet. If you look at the conversion process, there are all different providers who can help you with information and can give you the energy certificate, which will cost you between 300 and 500 euros. And if you want to make an appointment today, probably it will happen in the next 2, 3, 4 months. And on the financing side, you have also the municipalities and the provinces who can give you some extra money. And you have also mortgage lenders who solely focus on the energy sustainability conversion. So what we try to do is provide the customer with an integrated offering on the energy conversion. So if you go to the next sheet, because it's quite commercial. The next sheet, please. The next sheet will show you.
I think we have some problems with that.
Yes, so I will
then
already disclose what's on the next sheet. The next sheet shows the tooling that we have set towards the customer. When he comes for the first time with the intermediary can take him through the process, but he can do it also at home, and they can click on the various options that they have for do the energy sustainability conversion. And with every click, they can see what the savings are on energy, the investments are, the increase of the house price, but also they can see what the reduction will be on carbon dioxide on an annual basis, and the payback period over and the amortization of the investments. So this is an online tooling, but what they need to do, if you want to step into this process, you need to go to a energy advisor, a sustainability advisor who can provide you with all the defined costs, as I already mentioned, from a B to A. It's in general 5,000 euros, but if your energy level is higher and you want to go to a lower energy level, it can be more expensive. And how do we move now to the next sheet? Or am I the only one who's not seeing the presentation right now?
Huh? The presentation will come back in 1 second. I think Lucille is working on this.
I think we can keep talking and we'll get the slides as soon as we can.
Yeah, I will keep on talking. So it's not that difficult. It's not. So if you move then to the process, so we have the tooling in place, and the customer then has a visit with the intermediary, and the intermediary will show you what the possibilities are. And then you have the normal mortgage process with all the application, all the paper flow, and the context with the intermediary, and the context with the intermediary towards us as a mortgage originator. There is one essential differential that we do than other mortgage originators. We can provide the customer with the guarantee that if they take out our mortgage and our advice, their house will be converted for a fixed price towards the guaranteed energy level. That's guaranteed. So that takes out all the fuss and hustle and insecurity with the end consumer. So that's the process on the conversion of the energy label. That's this sheet. So that's the green box that's down there. This is the tooling. So we have seen that. So we're one sheet further. Yes. So the green boxes in this process are the add-ons that we do, and the green box below is the certainty about amount, timing, financeability, property value increase, which is guaranteed. And that's the change that we made in the originating process of the consumer. If you then go to the next sheet, so what we try to do is activate the customer not only with the process, but also with an effective pricing scheme based on normally you have the risk classes in the Netherlands and the interest rate fixed period, but we have also added a third element to the pricing scheme, which is the energy label of the property, which is in line with the E.ON QA what was sent to the Netherlands. And compared to other originators, the discount on the interest rates is applicable for the full loan amount, for the full tenor of the mortgage. So not only for the sustainability part, or not only for the first interest rate fixed period, but it's for the full tenor of the mortgage for the full amount. And that's a thing that the investor has to decide on, that he is willing to give this discount towards the end customer to add on the sustainability conversion of the Dutch housing market, and they're willing to do. The next sheet, I will keep it quite short, but that's based on the what we have achieved in the current mortgage market. We were launched on the 17th of August. We are already in the top 20 of mortgage originators in the Netherlands, and we have realized a market share of 1%. And that's on top of what we normally do with NN already in the Dutch mortgage market. So now we go to the more interesting part, which is on the next sheet. The observation and our key learnings so far. So in the Dutch mortgage market in general, we have three kinds of consumers. First, the buyers of a house who are stressed in the current market. Can we get a mortgage in time for the price that I want? The second one is our customers who are willing to refinance their house. And the third ones are willing to renovate their house. So in all these three different customers, it's difficult to get them on board to do the energy conversion and do the investment of 300 euros in the current market to get them activated to take these steps. So, but we're moving ahead at Woonnu. There are also a lot of consumers who are willing to increase the energy efficiency of their house, but are not totally aware that refinancing at that current moment is also an option. And that can lead to lower energy costs and lower interest costs. The next sheet. If we talk about apartments, apartments are also a large part of the Dutch housing stock. 15%, a lot of them also have the benefit of an energy guarantee. With these apartments, there is always a homeowner association in place. Financing at the homeowners association level is difficult in the current market. They're not allowed by regulation, by their own bylaws. The process of the decision is difficult and costful, and you've got all kinds of different customers in a apartment building. You got elderly people, people with less income, people who have more a sustainable heart. So it's difficult to activate them all at the same time. And as already mentioned, it's very difficult for a homeowner associate to borrow to take the upfront cost. But we are trying to get this moving as well at the Woonnu level. If we then go to the next sheet, it's about behavior and motivation, because the primary goals that people set to the energy conversion is cost saving, but there are other benefits like the comfort of your house increases and the value of your house is also increasing. But what we also see is that currently we also have customers who take out a house with an energy label of A already, of A+, and also take a large loan to increase the energy sufficiency of their house. And that's beyond the comfortable living. That's also a definite environmental consideration that these people take. So there is also a number of customers who doesn't put on their calculator, they just want to do the sustainability conversion. As such, with all these behavior and motivation for the customers, a tailored approach is required. And then again, the Dutch market is very active at the moment. The agendas of the intermediary are full, so we have to activate the intermediary to be able to provide the tailored approach towards the end customer. So if we then go to the next sheet, the hurdles in the current market. So I already was moving towards, there is a long way to go in making sustainability a standard part of the mortgage application process. High volume of transaction. Many intermediaries do not see the need to offer additional service and extend their service offering to the customer. However, there are many exceptions. The share of intermediaries actively engaging in discussions with their customers is increasing, and we at Woonnu are also taking all kinds of experiments with larger or smaller intermediary chains to help them take part of this process and create for them also a more sustainable income business model. Observations and key learnings so far. It will be challenging, this next sheet and even the last one. It will be a challenge to prove the realized energy efficient improvements. To meet the requirements of the EU taxonomy, a vast amount of data will need to be recorded and translated. That is really challenging in the Dutch market. This is currently not captured in the mortgage process and will require a huge effort for many stakeholders. Carbon dioxide reduction is as much driven by behavior, like if you have a swimming pool and a sauna and other hobbies that can cost a huge amount of energy, and that's difficult to how you can deviate the customer behavior and rely on statistic of the underlying property. So with the Woonnu label in the market for over half a year, we do see a progress. It's work in progress. We need to work on the intermediary to help them in the process of the advice to the customer. We need to also engage the investors if they're willing to take a small discount on their investments, just to add to the environment. And on top of that, there's the layer of the data that needs to be improved and aligned with the EU taxonomy, and if possible, try to go find the positive ways in the process. So 1 minute left for 4 o'clock.
Timing is absolutely perfect. Thank you, Hendrik Jan. Actually, it isn't perfect because I would like to have explored a couple of the specific points there in more detail, but yeah, we are out of time, and I'm very conscious that we have to stick to that. I think, in particular, the point about the intermediaries and working with the decision-making process in the apartments, I think, is very important and not something we've really heard enough about. But I guess we have to leave that for another time. So thank you. Thank you also, Vincent, Ligia, and Monica, for all of your presentations today. I think today, in addition to focusing on the Netherlands, we focused a lot on the democratic side of this, about what elected politicians think and what consumers actually really want from us, and also on some of the practical side, particularly in the Netherlands. So I hope that you found it useful. I hope you found it as interesting as I have. If you do have any, please speak to us, speak to the speakers, take a look at the presentations. They're all going to be on the EMF-ECBC website. And from our side, I hope to see you again next month. I think we're on the 18th of June, same time, same place next month. And thank you again. Back to you, Luca.
Thank you very much, Richard. It will be in the morning on the 18th. We changed a bit the timing because it will be on Friday and it will be in the morning. As general information, we will bring you to Scotland, and we will also go speaking again about the Dutch case, an important Dutch case on financial implication for the energy efficiency. The academic study has been prepared by the University of Frankfurt, the University of Venice, so we will have a nice presentation with, I think, very important financial implication from a financial stability point of view. We are also considering to have an additional Bauhaus in July, so we'll let you know. But I mean, we see more and more demand to present, so which is very nice. And also the audience is stable around 100 people. So I mean, we see a lot of attention. So we thank you all for participating, for sharing your ideas. And to Greenstorm, we use this word, Greenstorm. This is what we do in the Bauhaus, and we are delighted to have you with us. By the way, don't forget to watch our space, because tonight you will see a very nice video, and I want to see thousands of sharing of these videos, so please don't disappoint me. Watch this space. And thank you all. Thank you, Richard, for your kind moderation, and see you next time. Have a nice afternoon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.